Hi, we are the HNRQ crew. We are part of the Helping Novices Debug Relational Queries team, and I'm Alan. And there's also James Lim and Zachary Zheng on our team. So the motivation behind our project is pertains to SQL particularly, because debugging SQL queries is very non-trivial, and manually breaking down the execution of these queries is also very difficult and sort of very hard to visualize. So manually, that is. So our hopes is to create this debugger where users can visualize their queries and help them understand and debug it properly. And as you can see, SQL queries, they can be very difficult to visualize. As on the right side, we have this query, select name from drinker, etc. And on the right side is a tree manually drawn, and it's just very confusing. And as you can see on the left side, this with these tables. Overall, it's just hard to understand without a proper debugger. So our solution is to have this debugger that breaks down the query block by block, and we have a sample database instance to sort of simulate these query executions that users can play around with. And for each block, we also have its input and output tuples, and then we also have a tracing feature where users can highlight different inputs at a time, and it'll show the corresponding outputs that are relevant in the intermediate tables.
Yeah, so here's our project structure. So for our debugger front end, we are using Vue.js along with ndesign as our front end, and in our back end we have the Flask handling all the queries, and then the database is running on PostgreSQL, and then the Apache Cloud side is doing all the query breakdown, and then Flask gets the information and sends it back to the front end. And one of the difficult part of breaking down SQL query is that SQL queries can be very complex, and it could have a lot of sub queries inside it. So for example, if you want to have a query that returns drinkers who don't frequent any bars that serve no beers they like, for the innermost queries, you first have to, the query gets the beers like by name, and then using that information, we get bars frequented by name but not serving any beers they like. And then the outermost queries get the desired output, which is returning drinkers who don't frequent any bars that serve no beers they like. And so as you can see, when we have this kind of complex queries with a lot of subqueries inside it, in order to completely debug it, we have to get the hierarchy right, hierarchy of each subqueries, and then innermost queries. And then when there is a subqueries that are using the table from the outer query, we have to inject the value binding. So for example, we're using the name from the outer tables inside the inner queries. So here we're injecting then, which is one of the value inside the name table, as our value binding in order to go into that subqueries. And here's a picture that is representing the kind of complex queries that we could get. So context 0 is the outermost queries, and then it has 3 subqueries inside it, which is represented by 0-0, 0-1, etc. And then context 0-2 has another subquery inside it, which also has another subquery inside it.
All right, in terms of what we've done for the summer, our first half of the summer was mainly familiarizing ourselves with the current SQL debugger interface. So this is just like playing around, submitting queries and seeing what the interface currently does. We also in this period suggested improvements in designs that could help beginners more easily navigate through the UI. And during this period of the first half, we also were assigned minor tasks in order to get comfortable with the code base and just Vue.js in general, since many of us weren't as familiar with Vue. So this includes fixing certain bugs, such as displaying proper results for distinct queries and highlighting issues with set operations and nested subqueries. So as you can see on the bottoms, we have some bugs with highlighting. And for this query with the select distinct name from drinker frequents, our output is not displaying the unique values like it should be. All right, and as we moved on to the second half of the summer, as we got more comfortable with the code base, we actually had a new backend that we needed to implement. So our main goal for the second half of the summer was refactoring the front-end design and logic to accommodate for this new backend. And in addition, we came up with additional ideas that could be improved with our new backend, since we got new information that was previously not obtained. And most of our time was spent working to recreate the debugger page with the select from where operations and the set operations tracing.
So what was different with our new backend was that new backend provides information that's already in the tree structures, and it provides all the information needed for the entire query and its subqueries at once. And this allowed the front end to just simply render the provided information instead of re-executing all when we move into the subqueries or move out of the subqueries, which is what the old front end did. And it provided more efficient tracking, since the new backend provides a mapping that connects the tuple from each of the different tables. So it provides a mapping that we could check to find out how row of an output, where the row of an output is coming from. And here's a picture of a new backend and an old backend, just to show the difference. So in the old backend, you can see that just in one context, there's so many variables and so many things that are coming from the old backend, and this is actually like caught up. So there are more stuff coming in, but you can see it's a really complicated and a lot of information that we have to keep track of. But in the new backend, there's only like few numbers of information in the context, and this really helps us having a really clean front end.
And continuing, we learned tasks with a new front end. We focus on recreating the old front end design, but implementing this new back end. So first, our sort of workflow was, first we worked on the debugger base, and what that is focusing on rendering the context pane as well as the code view, so the users can just easily be able to see the query they inputted, as well as go through the different contexts, the different subqueries within that query. And then we split into two groups. One of them worked on the debugger for set operation view, and one of them worked on the debugger for select from where. Now we're going to do some demos for that. So I think James is sharing his screen now.
Yeah, so here is the debugging. So in the query, we selecting drinker from frequency table, except drinkers from frequency where drinker or where the bar is down under pub. And when we submit it, we get this kind of page that shows the left and right table of the set operation. And then the left and right, each of the rows in the left and right also has this number that shows number of duplicates, if there is any duplicate. And you can track where this row is coming from, or if it is in the output table, by clicking at any of this button or clicking this track button, and it will show you the explanation that shows why it is output, or it is in or not in the output table. And there's a difference in what is shown in the explanation if it's a bag operation instead of a stat operation. So if it's except all, it will allow a duplicate in the output table. And then, as you can see, if it's a bag operation, it will show you an arithmetic that will explain how there is a duplicate, if there is, in the output table. And Ellen will show the select from.
So that was the setup, and now this is the select from where. This is just a query that we have. Let's submit it. And it sort of displays the raw output down here, and then we can click debug. And this is what we currently have. So on the left side, we have the code view. Users can see the code, and we also have the context nav, where they can go through the different contexts, and it sort of drills down into these subcontexts, as well as changing this explain pane. And then we can go back to the overview, and then we have this from table with all the different tables that the users inputted, as well as this join and filter, which is the intermediate tables. So these are the intermediate values. We also have this aggregation down here for the aggregation of this query. And right here is satisfaction. This group right here is the only one that satisfies this aggregation. So we have true. We also have these different expressions over here, and that the users can look through, and you can also drill down into these to see the specific values that go to each of these groups. And then we also have this final output, just displaying the final output. We weren't able to completely replicate the old front end. One part that we were able to finish was this join tree and where tree, where users can see a visual representation of the tree structure of the query, and that's just because of a time constraint, as well as the old front end being very complicated and hard to sort through in respects to this portion, so we weren't able to finish that. There are a few other bugs that popped up that we haven't fixed yet, but those will be resolved in the future. And back to here.
Like Alan said, we are not currently completely finished with creating a stable version of the new front-end design. So I think some of us are planning on continuing this project in the fall, and if we were to do this, we would just be finishing up the last few features, such as the join tree and the where tree, and fix up any last-minute bugs. And in addition, the project as a whole is looking to add additional designs and features that help users even more navigate through subqueries even better. This includes a more revamped tuple tracking design, which allows users to kind of ping tuples and one by one sees how they're obtained in the later tables. In addition, we're thinking about breaking down complex join expressions and just showing them individually so that users have a more easily way of rendering them. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you.